Hey there, thanks for tuning into Duckbricks. I'm Chris, and the January 2025 LEGO Ninjago sets are here. So here is the entire wave of LEGO Ninjago in January 2025. There are some amazing sets here, and for this video, I'm going to be doing a mega review of all of the sets that are coming out next year on the 1st. Let me know what you think about these sets, and without further ado, let's jump up, kick back, whip around, and spin. Okay, so here is the entirety of the January 1st, 2025 LEGO Ninjago wave, and this is an interesting one. Compared to all of the other Ninjago waves we've gotten in the past, this is the most focused on a number of random gimmicks and interesting functions that you can do with the sets, mostly unlike which we've ever seen in Ninjago before. Whether it be splitting up a vehicle into multiple other vehicles, which we've seen very rarely, or having a pullback race car as an actual vehicle in Ninjago, having a mech riding a glider, having a dragon riding a jet, or having all sorts of different Spinjitsu gimmicks, this wave has something for everyone. And let's take a look at all the sets right now. Going from smallest to largest, technically our cheapest and smallest set here is the Polybag. This is a micro-scale version of the largest set of the wave, which is Zayns Ultra Combo Mech, the mini version, which you can actually rebuild into the different individual vehicles it splits off to. For the gimmicks, we have some $10 gimmick sets. Sora and Kai get Dragon Spinjitsu spinners, which also come with Dragonian enemies to battle, and then Aaron and Lord Raz get a $20 combo set, which does also come with this main temple in the center, which allows you to topple over some of the crowns. Going back to $10 for the standard retail sets, we have a Zayns Mech Battle Pack here, featuring Zayn in an exclusive shirtless outfit, as well as a couple of other minifigures, including a new Elemental Master of Swarm, Drix, a member of the Forbidden Five. Moving on from that, for $20, we have Lloyd's Green Forest Dragon, sporting some brand new wings for 2025. At $25, we have Lloyd's Pullback Race Car here, the first time we've ever seen a pullback vehicle for LEGO Ninjago, and then $40 brings us to a 4+ Spinjitsu Temple set, which I would imagine is probably non-canon and just meant to represent the ninja chilling and having fun. 40 euros, but $50 US gets you this set right here, which is Kai's Ninja Mech Storm Rider, which is a mech riding a jet coming with both Kai and Nia. And then we have the Dragonian Storm Temple for 40 bucks, or 50 in some regions, depending on which rumors are to be believed, coming with the very, very elusive, sought-after minifigure of Morro, a minifigure we have not seen in Ninjago since 2015. Finally, rounding up the rest of it, we have the $50 Aaron and Raz Super Storm Jet, which does technically have a splitting vehicle as well in the form of a robotic dragon for Raz. And lastly, we have my favorite set of the wave, which is Zayns Ultra Combiner Mech. Although technically this isn't really Zayn's mech, because it literally is Zayn. It's more like Ryu's mech, because he's the one riding it all. Overall, this is one of the most eclectic Ninjago waves ever. There's a lot to get into here, so I want to take a look at each of the sets very briefly, and stay tuned because I will also be publishing an in-depth mega review of every single one of the sets individually in a series of videos coming out on this channel. So if you want to dive deeper into any one of these sets, definitely go ahead and check out those reviews, which should be publishing shortly. But now let's take a look at each and every one of the sets as a quick overview. Before we get into the individual sets though, I want to spend some time to talk about the minifigure selection. Before you is a copy of every single LEGO minifigure from the Ninjago 2025 wave, minus Zayn in his standard outfit, and of course the reason for that is because he is off on a crazy adventure, and not because I somehow lost him in my LEGO collection in between filming these videos. No, definitely not. However, this is every other minifigure, and that's very embarrassing, it's never happened before, but Zayn is just missing. But as far as the rest of them, you can see it comes with a selection of villains, different ninja outfits in all sorts of different costumes, and some of the best Ninjago villain minifigures yet, in my opinion, in the form of the Dragonians, who sport 3 brand new molded components which make up their entire construction. I'm going to start off by taking a look at some of the most important side characters here. Morro is one of the most iconic characters to make a return. Jay is coming in a new rogue form, which is really exciting to see, sporting a brand new molded hat. And finally, we have Pixel being brought back into the mainline story after having not seen her since the original show. We also get 2 out of the 5 members of the Forbidden Five, Noct, who was basically the main member who we have kind of seen over the course of Season 2, as well as Drix, the elemental master of Swarm. Altogether, we have a ton of villainous forces as well as a ton of ninja, although I will say that it does feel a little bit unbalanced in the way that they've set up particular types of minifigures included in sets. Because of the way the sets are built, sometimes the ninja aren't supposed to have armor elements and sometimes they do, and that's why that we technically do not have a full armored up ninja team with this first wave, which is very, very strange to see. Moving on from that though, I do want to call out some of my other favorite little characters here, like a small little baby dragon. It actually looks to be like a female dragon based on the eyelashes there, which is a really cute counterpart to Baby Ryu, who does appear in the 4+ set. And of course, the ninja get all sorts of brand new outfits, with Zayns even getting a brick-built version of himself, which I'm sure is going to be very relevant to the storyline. And maybe you know that's what happened to my version of Zayns. He actually got battle damaged, and they had to rebuild him into the large-scale buildable figure. Zayns also gets an exclusive shirtless version of him included for the $10 Mech set, which is really interesting how, again, there is a big focus on Zayns being a primary character for this season, and I'm really excited to see where it goes. There's a different version of Kai, a different version of Lloyd, sort of, which you could make today with existing pieces, and only one version of Cole, which, again, I'm going to talk about a little bit more when I talk about the minifigure distribution, but I definitely feel like some more balance would have been nice to get for minifigures like this. A new version of Eren also comes in some of the sets, who, spoiler alert, has allied himself with Lord Roz, whereas Sora unfortunately doesn't have a new torso or legs and just features a brand new hooded component. Taking a look at the breakdown of the ninja minifigures here, and once again I will be doing a completely separate video taking a look at all of the minifigures in depth with high resolution turntables of every single figure, as well as all of the accessories, so stay tuned for that. I want to point out we get 3 minifigs of Zayns, 1 big fig of Zayns, 2 minifigures of Eren and Sora, 1 of Wildfire, who was unchanged from the prior year, 3 versions of Kai, none of which have armor unfortunately, 3 versions of Lloyd, 2 of which are a new suit without armor, 2 versions of Nia with armor, 1 version of Nia without armor, and then 1 version of Cole with armor. It's a very strange distribution, and I think it's one of the only times that we've gotten a brand new wave of Ninjago sets featuring the ninja in new outfits, except not all of them are fully armored up, which is a little bit bizarre to me. Speaking of the side characters, we have Jay, Pixel, Morro, and of course Wildfire as well, although I guess she kind of counts as part of the ninja team, plus the 2 baby dragons. I believe Morro and Rogue, aka Jay, are probably the most exciting characters to get, and while again I do want to save a lot of my in-depth analysis for that future video, I do want to showcase really quickly what Morro looks like with the 2 different facial expressions, because he looks really, really cool. Of course, I'll have a lot more thoughts to share when I go in-depth into all the minifigures, and so without further ado, let's jump into all of the sets from smallest to largest. Okay, I figured it made the most sense to start off with the Gimmick Sets. We have 2 $10 sets for Kai and Sora, as well as a $20 battle pack or maybe team-up pack with Eren and Lord Roz, which also comes with a small side build. This is pretty notable because it's one of the first times in recent history we've actually gotten spinners that are focused on combat in particular, as well as head-to-head combat, which we really haven't seen since around 2019, which is really crazy if you think about it. A lot of the other gimmicks and spinners we've gotten haven't really been focused on combat, and it's cool to see Ninjago go back to its roots. I'm going to be putting out a whole tournament video where I, alongside a very special guest star from the LEGO Ninjago community, faced off with these spinners in a gigantic battle where only one could remain, but until then, let me take a closer look at each of these spinners for this mega review. Now, I did get a chance to interview the designers of the LEGO sets over in Billund, Denmark, and unfortunately one thing they did state is that due to the nature of the way these spinners are launched, specifically being launched from a mechanism, they were not allowed to make them customizable and place studs on the sides of these spinners, in fear of kids hurting themselves or each other by placing spiky objects on the sides of the spinners. I don't necessarily know if I fully agree with that. I mean, we did grow up with these spinners that were fully customizable. That was the entire point, that you could mount studs to them. But also, those were spun by hand, and these were spun by mechanism, and the mechanism can actually get them spinning pretty fast. So I guess I understand why they specifically wanted to avoid that. Unfortunately, because of that, basically these spinners have literally no connection points to actual LEGO pieces. The only connection points the sides of the spinners have are clip components, which I guess maybe some very talented builders are going to use to figure out a cool way to use them as some sort of energy piece in the mock. But as it is right now, unfortunately, you can't really do much with them, and the base of the spinner itself is one of the most non-LEGO-like LEGO pieces I've ever seen, which was actually intentional because, again, they're not allowed to have any studs or LEGO connections on it in fear of kids getting harmed. Now, all of that aside though, the big question is it actually fun to play with these? And I would say, on the whole, yes, I definitely do feel like there was a more visceral sense to the original spinners. Seeing the minifigure fly off, actually getting you to be able to customize them and build up walls or barriers or build crazy weapons was a big benefit of the original spinners, which I feel like some of that is lost here. In fact, they technically aren't even allowed to advertise them with the minifigures holding weapons as they spin, because again, that would be a sharp connection point which could be attached to the spinners, so they have to advertise them purely as just the minifigs in the spinners. But of course, you know, it is Duck Bricks after all, we break the rules over here, and I managed to attach katanas to each of the figures to see if that would actually improve the offensive capabilities. I'm not even sure if it did. In fact, I actually think it made the spinning a little bit worse, but you know, it was worth a shot. Now, the way the game works is that you're supposed to battle the two spinners against each other, and once they hit each other, the way that you know if you've won is if you knock off one or both of the glowing transparent crowns on the sides of these spinners, which are pretty easy to knock off if you catch them at the right angle, and even better if you manage to knock the minifigure out of the spinner, which is actually a lot harder, and something you can only really do if you attach weapons. The only unfortunate thing here is that aiming these spinners is actually pretty difficult, and one thing that we noticed very quickly was that we would just launch spinners and then they would just barely miss each other and then just never hit, which maybe that was an issue with the old spinners as well, but I feel like you had a little bit more directionality in the way that you could spin them yourself. Because you're launching them from a mechanism, if your aim isn't 100% right, it's very easy for the spinner to just exit the mechanism and then immediately just start spinning in place and not go far enough across your board or table or wherever you're playing against to actually hit your opponent. Now, I'm sure the surfaces will depend on where you play this on, and again, this was really just only demoed for a few minutes with me and Bricks My Mind, but honestly, that was just our experience. It was a lot of fun, don't get me wrong, and it was very cool being able to compete with them. I just felt like they just didn't quite live up to my fond memories of the original Ninjago spinners. Still, that being said, the value is pretty good. For $10, you get not only a minifigure hero, aka Kai or Sora, but you also get a Dragonian warrior alongside the sets, so you get two minifigures even for the $10 ones, and the Aaron and Roz set does include a full-on buildable type of construction where the goal is to collapse one of the pillars to be able to make one of the golden crowns topple down. It's kind of another way of playing, although in full honesty, I was never actually able to make the pillars collapse by using just the spinners. I did try many times, and it just never really worked. So, I don't know, maybe that's a skill issue, but I definitely was expecting the mechanism to work a little bit better than that. Overall, this was a really fun type of thing to play with, and it is great to have combative spinners back in Ninjago's portfolio. I just don't think these are going to be quite the hits the original 2011 spinners were. But with that, we can move on to the regular system style sets. This is set number 71827, Zayns Battlesuit Mech. It retails for $10 US, comes with 92 pieces and 2 exclusive minifigures. Zayn in a special shirtless variant, who is a brand new torso, as well as Drix, the new Forbidden 5 member and the Elemental Master of Swarm. The set also includes a version of Wildfire identical to the original versions of Wildfire we saw earlier this year, although unfortunately she does not have her armor piece this time. It also contains one of the collectibles of the wave, a prismatic blade, which is a transparent opalescent satin clear blade molded for the first time in that color, which is super cool. Now, this doesn't quite reach the same value that the previous $10 small mech battle pack set that we got from Ninjago did, featuring 2 villain minifigures and 2 hero minifigures, but I do think it's really cool that it does include 2 exclusive figures, which may not even ever appear in another set. As far as the build for the mech, honestly, I'm a little mixed on it. I really love the way they did the limbs, especially the shoulders, utilizing the transparent clear tile elements as actual ice shards as shoulder spikes is super cool, no pun intended, and I really do like the parts usage there because it really adds on to the icy elemental energy of the mech. The only thing that really does throw me off though, to be honest, with a build like this is just how flat the front of the chest is. It's utilizing the same exact pieces used for stuff like the Nexo Knights battlesuits or some of the Marvel superheroes mini-mechs, but unfortunately they chose not to use the typical cover element they use for those mechs, instead opting for a more custom brick-built front of the actual suit, which I think is cool. They're trying something new, but unfortunately, since there's really no angles or curvature outside of just one single curved element, it feels like a very large, bulky, and just kind of like a flat, almost like panel element being pushed onto the front of the mech, which aesthetically speaking, I'm not the biggest fan of. Honestly, altogether, I think that from certain angles it's not that bad. Like viewed from the front, I think it's okay, but as soon as you actually take a look at what it looks like from the side, especially with the minifigure placed inside of it, it just feels very awkward to have a chest plate like that. Still, I can't really complain because it is phenomenal value for $10 with 3 minifigures, again 2 of which are exclusive and 1 of which is very desirable in the form of a member of the Forbidden Five. It absolutely is like a miniature minifig pack, and I think that is something that's really cool. Again, I'll be taking a much closer look at these figures in my figure review, but seeing Zayns have a brand new outfit exclusive to a smaller set is super cool. And I'm very curious to see if maybe this means that he gets battle damaged, where you obviously have the exposed chest here, and maybe that will cause him to be rebuilt into the brick-built Zayns form, which we later see, or somehow he'll have to fuse with a mech. Only time will tell, but overall, it's a cute small set, nothing super crazy to say about this one, and we can move on to the next build. This right here is Lloyd's Green Forest Dragon, set number 71829, retailing for $20 and coming with 128 pieces. However, 2 of which are these large brand new wing elements introduced for Ninjago this year. They're like a much bigger version of the previous large dragon wing, which had 2 technical attachment elements, and these ones have 3. It includes Lloyd in a very weird suit, I don't really know what they're cooking with that one, as well as a Dragonian warrior, plus a new color for the baby dragon Ryu piece, which is now just kind of a generic baby dragon piece now that they're using it in different colors for a female dragon. And of course, the main focus of the set is on the forest dragon. I have a lot of things to say about this build, and we're going to get into it more in the individual review that's going to be coming out, but first and foremost, I actually really like the color scheme of the set. I feel like the dark blue underbelly with the dark green top, as well as just a little bit of a hint of the standard bright green of Lloyd, is a really nice color scheme, and definitely one that makes it stand out because there are a lot of interesting implications for what this could be in a Ninjago set. It's one of the first times we haven't gotten a dragon that is explicitly tied to one of the elements, because again, Dragons Rising is introducing all sorts of different types of dragons, not necessarily just ones that are tied to the elements, and it has a very unique color scheme to boot. Having a dark green color scheme makes this feel more almost realistic in a fantasy style setting, and I like how it kind of harkens back to Lloyd's legendary dragon with the dark blue underside. The gold claws are a nice touch, just adding a little bit of extra splash of color to the build, and it's also really cool to get a brand new printed element for the dragon flag in the 2x3 tile. Now, I do have to address the very strange minifigure situation here. It's Lloyd using his Season 1 Dragons Rising suit with the Season 2 Part 1 Elemental Mech hood and the Season 2 Part 2 Tournament armor. Why they did not just use Lloyd in his brand new suit with armor, who, may I add, does not actually appear in any of the other sets in this wave, is very bizarre to me. I don't really know why they kind of made this hodgepodge suit. It feels like something that one of the Ninjago European magazines would come up with and not something that you would see in a standard set, but I guess that LEGO maybe wanted to give it a bit of a different feel. Potentially, even though they've never really paid attention to this in sets, this could be in an earlier scene where he's wearing this suit before he dons a newer style of suit. I guess only time will really tell, but overall, Really strange to get just this random variation of Lloyd, but otherwise, the rest of the set is really solid. The wings for the dragon flap up and down, and really the only downside to me is that the legs are mounted on click hinges instead of mixel joints, so you can't actually swing them back and forth, you can only splay them out side to side. I get that that's done for stability and it's to make it easier for younger kids to play with the dragon, but it definitely does feel like it would have been really cool to be able to actually have it be in more of a flight mode by bending the legs back, and I still think it would have stood up just fine. Still, it's nice to be able to actually wiggle the toes around and move them, and it is cool to get an opposing faction member as well with the Dragonian Scout. Not necessarily a fully kitted out Dragonian, but one that still features the brand new under jaw armor element as well as a battle axe, which all of the Dragonian Scouts wield. But figure-wise, the highlight of the set for me is definitely the new flame yellowish-orange colored baby dragon. It's cool to see like a female dragon print on the dragon here, and now I want this baby dragon in a ton of new colors. It's kind of wild to me that LEGO currently has like 4 different molds for baby dragons. They have this one, they have the Source Dragon Spirits, they have a baby dragon they made for Harry Potter, and a baby dragon they made for D&D, all within like the span of a year or two. But you know what, as long as we keep getting these in different colors, I am very happy. Overall, the Forest Dragon is actually a pretty solid set at $20. Unlike some of the other sets that we're unfortunately about to see, it doesn't really feel overpriced. It feels like just the right price for a small-scale dragon, 2 minifigures, and a baby dragon, especially because we do get those large green wings. And again, my only complaint is really with the way the legs are built, and I guess a very minor thing is that the wings do feel a little large for a dragon like this. Clearly, they were made with much larger dragons in mind, but I kind of find it funny that in their debut year, they're used on 2 smaller scale dragons just because of the sets they happen to be in, and I personally can't wait to see LEGO do a much larger dragon utilizing these wings. That's all for this set though, and let's move on to the next build. Next up, we've got 71828 Lloyd's Pullback Race Car. It retails for $25 US and comes with 181 pieces as well as 2 minifigures. Lloyd in his brand new Storm Rider suit without the armor to make him fit in the car, as well as a Dragonian warrior who doesn't have the mini dragon and wing attachment that all of the other Dragonian warriors have. The main gimmick of the set is in the name. It's a pullback race car, and it's actually really interesting because LEGO has never done something like this for Ninjago. Even for the Sons of Garmadon wave, we never got pullback engines being integrated into Ninjago builds, and I'm really curious as to how this one does. Obviously, I think the target market for this set, especially compared to many of even the other Ninjago sets on the list, is definitely for much younger kids, and it kind of skews the line between almost being like a 4+ set. It's really only 7+ because there's a lot of technique being used in putting it together to actually make the pullback function work. As far as the pullback motor is concerned, it is just using the standard pullback motor that we have seen in the LEGO Technic pullback cars, and I think there are pros and cons of that. It works very well, so there was no need for LEGO to redesign it and make it a more system build, but unfortunately, because they had to integrate this Technic pullback motor, as well as make the car as solid and durable as possible with it racing along and likely crashing into things, most of the car is built predominantly with a Technic frame that is very, very visible. In fact, it is not the most interesting build because a lot of it is just Technic lift arms, and the motor itself isn't really covered up that much. They made no attempt to hide the fact that there is just a large dark gray block of a motor, which, I don't know, maybe actually plays into the marketing of the set where it's like, yeah, you can see that this has a big pullback motor and that's the entire point, but unfortunately, aesthetically speaking, I feel like the back of the vehicle just kind of feels like it's tacked on, like almost like it was an added on aspect to a pre-existing Ninjago build. Now, aesthetically speaking, there are some things I do actually like about it. The transparent green electricity energy blade elements being used on the side of the vehicle are actually really cool, and I feel like they add a lot of sense of speed and dynamicism to the model. I also like the usage of a lot of these new recolors, like the LEGO Ideas train element being recolored in green to just have some linkage arm connectivity alongside the side of the vehicle. You have the lime pieces being used for the Technic panels, and I genuinely think that actually it is really cool how they managed to integrate even the large hook elements, which were introduced earlier this year for the climbers, as the back spoiler of the car. That being said though, I'm also going to be honest, this is not the most interesting Ninjago vehicle. In fact, I would dare say it is actually one of the least interesting vehicles we've gotten from Ninjago, and most of that is by design. It has to be sleek, it has to be compact, it has to be stable when it crashes into things, and it has to be predominantly made out of Technic to make sure it's stable but also house the giant motor. Because of that, the designers clearly didn't have a ton of wiggle room when actually playing around with designing this set to make it have any crazy aesthetic features that would maybe potentially fall off if this is crashing into walls. It does include, of course, little pieces of fire that you can knock over, and maybe the minifigure doesn't have the dragon mount on the back because that makes the minifigures more stable when they're standing, and they purposefully wanted you to drive into them and have Lloyd commit vehicular manslaughter, but overall, I do think that because of the functionality of the build, the final set does suffer a little bit as a result. Still, it is really nice to get these slightly newer style of wheels, which we first saw in the Creator Expert Icons cars being recolored in lime green. That's a good recolor to get, and I do like the color scheme in general. The mix between the regular green, the lime green, and kind of the bright green is a nice touch for the vehicle. I think it actually does have a very nice Lloyd-centric color scheme, but I also feel like maybe they could have themed this around any of the other characters. It's kind of weird to get two $20-some sets that are both focused on Lloyd, and I guess maybe that's why they chose to include a different minifigure in the Dragon set, just so you get something different if you get that one versus this one. That's pretty much all I have to say for this one. $25 is high for this set, and I definitely think it's a little too high. $20 seems very fair to me. But again, I do have to factor in the fact that it does have a pullback motor and the large blade pieces, although I will also say that that never stopped Technic from having much cheaper pullback options. That's all for this one though, and let's take a look at something a little bit more interesting. Next up we have a smaller set, but one of the most interesting ones of the wave. This is 718 for 1, the Dragonian Storm Village, retailing for $40 US and coming with 305 pieces, but a ton of minifigures. You have a Dragonian Warrior, a Dragonian Scout, Nia fully armored up, Zayns fully armored up, technically exclusive to the set with the hood, and the two main stars of the show, Jay as Rogue, his new identity, and Morro, returning for the first time in minifigure form since 2015. Now I am very curious to see what role Morro plays in the story, and I have a lot of speculation on that, but just to focus on the set first, we're going to start off with the minifigures because, again, this is the most interesting part of the set. Getting Nia and Zayns in their fully outfitted costumes is really good to see, as well as two villains. It is the Dragonian Storm Village after all, so it makes sense to have at least a couple of them. And I like how the set actually gives you all the component pieces to fully armor up the other Dragonian Scout included in the set with a detachable dragon as well as an extra upper mask. It's really cool that you can actually choose to get two fully armored up Dragonian warriors. Now, aside from those though, the two stars of the show are Jay as Rogue and Morro. Now, starting off with Jay, it is really interesting to see him actually take on a brand new identity here. Again, I will be focusing on an in-depth look at the minifigures coming very soon, so we'll be spending a lot more time there, but it's really awesome to see him sporting a brand new mold for the hat, one that we have seen in the show already, used by the Forbidden Five, but he also has an interesting color scheme of sand blue on one arm, he has a dark blue color scheme for the rest of the suit, golden detailing and armor, as well as a J symbol on the back of his torso. Everything about the figure is really well done. And the only thing that, yes, I have seen people making a lot of jokes about is that yes, Jay is technically bald as this version of the character, and obviously in the show he's gonna have hair, the hat's just gonna sit on top of it, but because they didn't make a specialized dual molded hair and hat combo piece, which I actually don't think they needed, they just chose to not print the back of the head, give us a new angry head print for Jay, and then just give him the hat. So I think from most angles it works okay. From certain angles it is very obvious he doesn't have hair on the back of his head, but I think it actually works out fine, and it does really add on to the look and feel of the figure to have him actually be wearing a hat like this to mask his identity. Now, the main minifigure here is Morro. I have literally no idea how they're going to fit him into the story. That being said, at the very beginning of Ninjago Dragons Rising, they did mention that they would be explaining how the Departed Realm works now with the combining of all of the realms, so maybe he has a say in that. I also could see him having a really cool parallel with Aaron, who is kind of going down a dark path now, so very curious to see how it actually will be factored into the show. The main thing about about Morro and the difference between the original minifigure is that unfortunately transparent neon green, and transparent neon orange for that matter, are no longer colors that LEGO can produce ever since they changed the transparent color of plastic, and because of that they're just using the regular transparent green for the arm, which is fine. I still think the trans neon green was a lot cooler for the ghosts. It made them really pop out more, but LEGO is really doing the best they can with the materials they have on hand. Getting sand green is a nice color scheme to factor into the legs though, and it's cool to see a mix of sand green and dark green for his body, but the headpiece is what I love the most. It makes him look almost a little bit older in the way that he's actually built with cheekbones. He has two different expressions, one that is kind of more of a friendly one and one that has a very ghostly aura, and I think that is super cool how they were able to focus on that. All in all, this is pretty incredible value for having 6 different minifigures, and kind of reminds me of the other previous Ninjago figure pack sets we would get, like the Gamers Market or the Tournament of Elements, where we would have a ton of minifigures all factored in. Now, of course though, part of the set is the build as well. It's not just all about the figures, and the big question is this really worth $40? And I think you can probably guess what my answer is. Not really. The build itself is very, very rudimentary. It is hardly what I would call a village. I would say it is more like maybe a pagoda is being favorable and generous, I think. It is incredibly shallow as a build, and while it does integrate some fun play features like a collapsible bridge, which is utilizing the same exact type of building techniques that we first saw in Tournament of Elements, also back in 2015 for a smaller set, as well as a skeleton, which I guess would be a 7th minifigure in the set if you do count it, included underneath the cave, there's nothing really that revolutionary going on here. There's a nice build for a, I guess, Dragonian style of skull near the front of the mountain, and I can imagine that in the show this is going to look really, really extensive and cool, and I just wish that LEGO was able to give us just a lot more size and scope to this village, because as it is right now, it isn't really a village, it's mostly just a very, very thin type of temple with not a lot of depth to it. There is the obligatory Ninjago cage, which is something that we've seen a lot of times in different sets, as well as a weapon rack to hold the weapons for the Dragonians, but overall, nothing super crazy is going on here. Good to get another prismatic blade in this set, because again, they are including as many of these prismatic blades in these story focus sets as possible, but altogether, unless you're really excited about the minifigures, which I'm gonna be honest, I am really excited about the minifigures, so I totally would have paid full price for this, I don't necessarily know if it's worth the $40, especially for only 300 some pieces. But with that, we can move on to the other $40 set, the 4+ set. This right here is the Ninja Spinjitsu Temple. Set number 71831 retails for $40 and comes with 158 pieces. Although, again, this is a 4+ set, so the value is kind of crazy and the piece count isn't very helpful to determine that. It comes with 4 minifigures plus Baby Ryu, and I'm gonna imagine that this is maybe not necessarily going to be something we're gonna see in the show. Of course, it does have Baby Ryu after all, and it does include different versions of the characters, Lloyd and Kai armored up, but without the actual shoulder armor, and then Zayne and Nia. Zayne is reusing the Detective Zayne face from the Ninjago City Market's large set, which is really cool to see it coming in a smaller set, and Nia is utilizing one of her standard headpieces, but this time with the dual molded hairpiece, no cowl. The main build of the set is this large temple-like build, which is actually pretty nice for a 4+ set. Compared to a lot of the other building-based 4+ sets, this one is actually really well done. I like the usage of the dark green roofing as well as the red on the top, and seeing just a lot of different scenes play out in this set is really sweet. There's a serene meditation area where Nia can enjoy some tea and potentially sit down, meditate, relax alongside the water plus one of the cherry blossom trees, and then there's a whole blacksmith area for Kai to actually be forging swords, which is pretty cool and tying back to the actual character. Of course, in the center you have an actual battling platform with 2 different gears which you can spin around to cause the characters to battle each other as part of training, and then 2 weapons that can cascade downwards and attack any characters who try to claim the golden trophy. Which kind of looks like the LEGO Masters trophy. Overall, it's a really solid build, and the color scheme does remind me a lot of the Ninjago core sets, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I think the white, dark green, and red is actually a pretty interesting and cool color scheme to get for Ninjago buildings, and it is something that does definitely feel unique for Ninjago, and yet still something ancient and feeling like it fits into this ancient world. Now, There honestly isn't that much else I have to say about this particular build, other than really the value. $40 for 158 pieces again feels like a lot, but do consider that many of these are printed and you do have that large gateway piece being used there, and it is a 4+ set. It honestly doesn't even have that much bad value compared to a lot of the other 4+ sets we've been seeing, which are pretty ridiculous for what you get. I mean, for only $10 less, we have the Mandalorian's N1 Starfighter, which is a very, very tiny little ship. This is actually a pretty big and sizable thing, and I'm really happy with the way they were able to integrate as much detail as possible despite it still being a 4+ set. Would it have been cool to get the characters fully armored up with the shoulder armor? Yes, but LEGO typically doesn't include shoulder armor in 4+ sets anyway, so I think it totally makes sense. It's nice to get the Detective Zayne face and maybe more of a casual look for the ninja, where this is really just about the ninja not really having any sort of enemies or conflict, but just training and living life, which is very rare for a Ninjago set to feel like a slice of life build, which I really appreciate. That's pretty much all I have to say about this one, so let's move on to the next set. This is 71830 Kai's Mech Storm Rider, which retails for $50 and comes with 333 pieces, and yes, you are hearing that correctly. It is important to note, however, that many of those pieces are very large. We have the golden Power Miner wheels, we have large-scale LEGO space cockpit and bottom pieces used for the engines, and you have some large Technic panels, so I guess they really were able to try to factor that into the price. It comes with 3 minifigures, Kai without armor because he has to fit in the mech, Nia with armor, as well as a Dragonian warrior. Now this is a really, really interesting set, and I gotta give it to Ninjago. They always try to come up with something new and unique, and this is definitely that. Going off of the concept of a mech riding a larger vehicle as pioneered in Ninjago Core with another Kai set with Kai's mech driving a motorcycle, they decided to go all out with this one and have a mech be piloting some sort of a glider vehicle. Honestly, this reminds me a lot of the Bionicle sets that we got in 2008, with kind of a large-scale action figure driving a slightly larger speeder, but it is a really interesting idea for a LEGO build, just with mixed execution. Now, there's a couple things I like about the set, and there's a couple things that I don't. First of all, for a set that is focused on a mech driving this vehicle, I'm gonna be completely honest, the mech and vehicle, when combined, don't really look that good. I actually think that the Storm Rider vehicle, the jet for Nia, looks way better as a jet on its own, and the mech also just looks a lot better when it's not sitting on top of this vehicle. As it is right now, it just feels a little bit awkward, how the mech is riding it like a speeder, but it's mounted really far up on the back of the vehicle, and then you have these like large engines on the front of it. I don't really know, I'm just not necessarily feeling the aesthetics, but maybe that's just me. The other thing that the box art very cleverly hides throughout all of it is this very awkward large black brick component on the back of the vehicle that allows it to balance when the mech is riding it because of the wacky and weird proportions, with it being very front heavy with the engines and then having a big mech sitting on the back. They had to introduce these large sloped elements on the back of the model, which unfortunately really do mess with the aesthetics and kind of the aerial swooshability of the vehicle. It really does feel like it is obviously just meant to be like a toy and not something that I can realistically see flying through the sky. Especially when you're a kid playing with this, you're gonna see this thing flying back and forth. I can think of a couple ways they could have solved this problem, and one of those is maybe by allowing you to angle the back tail fins to act as a kickstand when you're actually in landing mode and not have to have these giant bricks near the back of the model which mess with the aesthetics, but thankfully from the front it is pretty well hidden. And if you notice on the box art and all of the images of the set, they did a really, really good job of hiding those very awkward back components, so folks buying it maybe won't even necessarily see that they're kind of messing with the aesthetics there. Altogether, I just have mixed feelings about this one because I feel like they actually had the bones of a really interesting set. Like the glider vehicle rider itself, I don't know even what to call it, I guess it's kind of like a jet, is genuinely pretty cool. The big engines are really fun to play with, and I love how you can actually angle them on the click ratchet hinges. It's really cool to see the piece introduced for the Bumblebee Transformer set being used outside of that set as kind of a dual click joint attachment element. Nice to see that being used there. But then it's just aesthetically speaking, the mech on the back really messes with me. I don't know, I'm just not a big fan of the mech riding it. I'm not even necessarily against the concept of mechs riding other vehicles. I think it could be pulled off in a really fun way. This just isn't really it for me because it almost just feels tacked on as a gimmick. It also doesn't help that we've gotten so many Kai mechs with this exact same style before. I think this is our third because we got one for the core dojo, we got one for the core Kai motorcycle rider, and now we're getting one for this, and that's not even to count all of the many other mechs we've gotten in this style from Ninjago, which is nice and it's a good style to build off of, but it would have been nice to get it for just a different character. I mean, honestly, if they just switched the pilots and like put Kai in the pilot seat for this one, put Nia in the mech, and then color the mech Nia colors, I think that would have been at least a little bit more visually interesting. Although I guess that LEGO was a little bit afraid of making sets focused on the female character, even to this day, which is pretty unfortunate, but I guess LEGO is seeing Ninjago as marketed towards young boys, and that's why they've mostly predominantly been focusing on that. All in all, I really think for this set, the big clincher for me is the price. It is 333 pieces, and again, a lot of those pieces are large, but if this was like $30, I would be pretty okay with it. Even if it was $35, I would be like, alright, fine, it's okay. It's not the best set, it's not the worst, it's just okay, but for $35, $30, that's not too bad. But no, this set is not even $40. The set is $50, which is bizarre and crazy to me. It is somehow worse value than the Aaron buggy, which came out earlier this year, which was also kind of much complained about of being just really bad value. And I don't really know what the deal is with that. It is very strange, and if you look at other regions of the world, it is not this expensive. But then, if you compare this to the last $50 set, Aaron's Ninja Off-Road Buggy Car, that one did have less pieces, but it was substantially a lot bigger. A lot of those pieces were big wheels, and it did have the big blades and Technic panels. And that was actually even more substantial than this, because at least that one had 4 minifigures and a baby dragon. This set, on the other hand, does suffer a lot from just having 3 minifigures, one of which doesn't have armor, none of which are exclusive, and then having just a very small build for the price. That's really all I have to say about it. Honestly, I really went into this one wanting to be more positive, but just the price really kills it for me, especially because of how awkward the build is too. But beyond that, thankfully, we're about to get into the good stuff. So let's move on past this and take a look at our next set. Now this next set is awesome. 71833 is Roz and Aaron's Super Storm Jet. Retailing for $50 US, it comes with 510 pieces, Lord Roz, Aaron, as well as a Dragonian warrior, plus an extra little Dragonian dragon. This is a really interesting build because, first of all, it's one of the only times that we've seen a hero and villain team up. Of course, spoiler alert for Ninjago, Aaron is working with Lord Roz in the new season, so I'm very excited to see how this is going to play out. But it also is really cool because it is a brand new color scheme for a Ninjago vehicle. It's dark blue and keyed orange, and it's the first time we've gotten that for a flying vehicle like a jet. And speaking of which, it has a really interesting shape. When I first saw this jet, I imagined that it must have some sort of a transformation feature because of all the crazy angles for the wings, but that's actually not the case. Aside from a small detachable, somewhat robot-looking dragon for Roz on the top, this is a jet that is pretty much just fixed on its own, and I definitely think it looks a lot better without the detachable dragon, which is looking like a common trend throughout a lot of these Ninjago combo vehicles. The actual vehicles look better when they're not combined. Let's take a look at the jet on its own here, and one thing I really love about this is just the sleek shaping of the build. You have so many different aggressive angles being utilized here at very interesting ways that we've not really seen in a standard LEGO set before, especially not like any Ninjago jet. I've seen a lot of comparisons being made to Jay's Stormfighter, even the Legacy version, but honestly I have to disagree. I think that this one is even more interesting when it comes to the angles compared to even a jet like that, and it's pretty rare to see a jet for Ninjago, so I'm very happy to see them go all out for this. Now, color scheme wise, I feel like Eren has finally come into his own with a mix of dark blue kind of making it more edgy, more aggressive, and then the flame yellowish orange being his signature color there. It just all blends together super well, and I'm very happy with how the color scheme works and how they were able to pull it off. The functions of the jet actually allow you to detach the front as its own detachable escape pod, which is very cool. Reminds me of a lot of the other older LEGO space sets, so that's awesome to see. And if you don't want to mount Raz on the dragon on the top, there actually is a cockpit to place him in the center as well, which is pretty cool how this has seating for 2 minifigures given that it is a team-up vehicle. There are some new blade elements being used on the back of the jet in purple and trans pink, which I don't really necessarily know if those fit in well. Like, they feel more like energy trails or maybe bits and pieces of the storm clinging onto the jet. I'm very curious to see what that's going to look like in the show, but overall, I'm very happy with the overall aesthetics of this build. It is so swooshable, it's so unique in its shaping. It's almost like an X-Wing, but if the wings were at even more extreme angles, canted forwards and angled upwards. There's a lot going on here, and I love just how unique it is as a Ninjago vehicle. The addition of the trans black for both cockpit pieces is really cool as well. Spring-loaded missiles, always good to see. 2 gigantic rocket boosters on the back and full-on interior detailing for the cockpit with different stickers showcasing the jet. This is just super cool, and there's not even much else I have to say about the build. It just is so much fun to swoosh around and play with. Now, obviously, I do have a lot of thoughts on the price of this set as well. 510 pieces for $50 is actually pretty good, and it's one of the few sets of the wave that I'm feeling it in hand and can totally feel like, yeah, the price is 100% justified. I am very happy to pay $50 for this. Would it maybe have benefited from potentially another Dragonian warrior or a different style of hood for Eren than the one we get in the spinners? Maybe one that we've seen in some other images of future sets coming out, which is his normal hood but in black and gold? Yeah, I think that would have been nice to see, but I do think it is still cool to get the focus put on the jet because there's a lot going on with the build. Once again, I'm a fan of how they pulled this off, and really the only major downside I have for the build here is the dragon that Lord Raz is riding on the back of the vehicle seems very superfluous. I get that it's supposed to be a combo set where you have 2 different characters piloting 2 different things, but I would have been totally happy just putting Raz in the upper cockpit and not having that dragon. Who knows if that's even going to be canon, but as it is, the color scheme doesn't really match at all. The black and purple and gold doesn't really fit with the yellow and blue of the jet, and even the dragon itself is very simple and rudimentary. It's just using the katana elements as wings, and while it is nice to get yet another recolor and new print for the Ryu dragon headpiece, this time in black with some gold metallic robotic printing and a very robotic looking glowing pink eye, I just don't really know if this was needed for the set. I think it could have totally stood on its own without the detachable dragon, and honestly, the jet looks even cooler when you do not have the dragon attached. Now, I do think there maybe could have been a couple cool things they could have done, like when the front jet splits off, maybe if there was a way to attach the dragon on the front, that would be really cool, but they didn't choose to do that. It really is just kind of fixed as it is. So right now, not a big fan of that little miniature dragon, but everything else about the set is super cool. I love the transparent blue exhaust elements being used for the engine intakes up at the front. There's a lot of phenomenal detailing being used here, and overall, big fan of this set. It's definitely one of my favorite Ninjago jets ever, and with that, we can move on to the big one. Here we have set number 71834 Zayns Ultra Combiner Mech. Retailing for $100, this comes with 1,187 pieces and includes 6 minifigures plus a buildable Zayne figure, which is supposed to be Zayne. Now, the set is called Zayns Ultra Combiner Mech, but that is technically a misnomer because it is not his mech. In fact, the entire build is Zayne, with of course Ryu piloting it on the top, which is a completely new direction for Zayne, and I'm very curious how they actually get him there. Now, in terms of the minifigures, we have Pixel returning for Dragon's Rising for the first time, Noct, the Elemental Master of Brute Force and a member of the Forbidden Five, great to get him as a minifigure, a Dragonian Scout, Dragonian Warrior, Cole, who is currently exclusive to the set, and Sora, who is sporting her golden hood, identical to the version that we see in the spinner. It also goes for a slightly more grown-up version of Ryu, not his full adult form, just kind of a slightly older teenager with much larger wings, once again utilizing that new large-scale wing element introduced for this year. Of course though, the main gimmick behind the set is that you can split it up into 4 different vehicles, each of which actually look really good on their own, and that is something that genuinely surprised me. Whenever LEGO does a combo vehicle like this, especially with the previous Ninja Ultra Combo Mech, I'm gonna be completely honest, I wasn't super impressed with the individual vehicles. Some were better than others, that's true, but I definitely felt like obviously the mech form looked the best when it was a mech. For this though, I can't actually say the same. Each of the individual vehicles feels like it could totally be a set in and of itself. They feel very polished on their own. The car vehicle could be a Ninjago car set. The jet is really fun to play with. You can rotate the engines around and have it be spinning around almost like a Star Wars starfighter, like one of those Mandalorian fighters. That could totally be a set. The Mini Zayns also could be a set. Even Ryu could totally be a set. In fact, it was just very similarly like a set earlier this year. All of these components are really well done, and it's such a testament to the incredible talent of the designer, Lychee Wing, who I highly recommend you check out on Instagram for his very detailed breakdowns of how all of these sets come together. The transformation process is very solid. It takes just a few seconds to actually transform this, splitting it up into the different vehicles and components, and you can just put them back together as easily, which is really nice. Sure, 2 of the components are kind of characters in their own right, like one of them is a buildable Zayns, one of them is a Dragon Ryu who's just mounted to the back, but the main components making up the actual vehicles like the car and the jet work really nicely. I think the jet was the one that impressed me the most, especially because when you look at the build, it's very hard to see how you can turn the torso into a jet, but then you take the torso, you take each and every one of the hands, mount it on the front and back for the cockpit and the back engine, which was of course a cannon on the actual mech, and then you just change around the position of the shoulders and make it into wings. And it totally works. I'm really impressed by how they were able to pull together the different components for the torso and arms to actually transform it into a viable jet. Of course, in mech form, the set is actually a lot of fun to play with as well. You can pose it around, and obviously there are no knees, but the nice thing is that you actually do have a full range of articulation for the front, feet, and ankles, which means you can kind of put it into a walking pose if you so fit. Sure, compromises had to be made, and it's not quite as posable as other Ninjago mechs, but it's still really well done. I really like how bulky it feels. It looks really cool, and you can still get it into all sorts of dynamic poses, like even a superhero landing pose, just by being able to move around the articulation of the arms, the elbows, and the legs. Now, the really cool thing about this is that yes, you can split it into 4 vehicles, but there's also a number of other things you could do with it. If you move the legs together, you can actually combine it into kind of like a tank-like form with a humanoid figure shooting on the top, which is super cool. It's just a completely different look and feel for the build, but something that actually works out very well as a vehicle of its own. That requires no removal, nothing pretty much taken away from the build, but it actually works as a completely different configuration, which is something I think is super cool. There's just so much play value and so much just value in general that you get out of this build. It's easily one of my favorite Ninjago sets in a long time, and honestly, I'm gonna have to wait and see what other sets we get in 2025. Obviously, the year is still very young, and we still have no idea what else LEGO has planned, but this is a very strong contender for being on the best sets of the year list for me, because it's just so much fun, it's so durable, it's easy to play with, it's easy to transform, the jet is so satisfying to swoosh around and make the engines and wings rotate around it. Baby Dragon Ryu, or I guess Teen Dragon Ryu, is super fun to play with just on his own as an actual standalone dragon. The car just works so well. You can move open the cockpit, have stud shooters poke out, have Pixel be driving it around, and then of course you have the robot version of Zayns upgraded in a larger form, which is just so cool to get as a character and has huge story implications, and best of all, because he is now the face of the mech, you can actually have a face for the mech looking around back and forth without just being the smaller minifigure head, which is very nice. Altogether, This is a real masterpiece of a set, and it's a masterpiece in a very different way than the previous $100 Ninjago mech was. Whereas that one, Cole's Titan Dragon mech, focused primarily on articulation and making it feel like more of an adult collector's type of model, which had all sorts of different piston articulation and ratcheting joints and knees and sliding panels. This goes in a completely different direction, making it a fun toy to play with and split up into different vehicles, and focuses on maxing out all those vehicles into their best possible forms. It's just an example of Ninjago doing what it does best, introducing creativity and innovation and just some of the best building techniques into a set like this. I am really happy with this set. I cannot give it a more glowing review. As an adult collector, do I prefer Cole's Titan Dragon mech to this? Definitely. I still feel like I am more drawn towards a fully posable figure as opposed to something like this, but I have to appreciate and respect the engineering behind this. The sheer amount of skill it took to pull this off, making each of the vehicles actually look good, is crazy to me. Because again, the last time we got something like this, the component vehicles did not look nearly as good as this does. So I'm a big fan of the set. I think it's really impressive as a technical model, and the minifig selection is pretty top-notch as well. Pixel being exclusive to the set with a brand new headpiece is very cool, getting knocked in a set for the first time is awesome, and even Cole exclusively in the set, while I wish he appeared in a few of the other sets, is still nice that you can then complete the ninja team by getting this, although hopefully he will appear in some of the future sets and, if we're very lucky, some magazines as well. I'll be going a lot more in-depth into the set on my individual review, as I will be on all of the other sets on this list that we've taken a look at so far, but with that, I think it's time we take a step back and look at the wave as a whole. The good, the bad, and the pricey. Okay, and that sums up our look at all of the Ninjago Dragons Rising Season 3 sets for the first wave of the year in January 2025. I'm gonna be completely honest. I am a little bit mixed on this wave. Whereas typically I am very positive on Ninjago set waves, I think that there are some things this wave does that take big swings. Some of them really pay off. The Zayns Ultra Combo Mech is phenomenal. It is one of the best examples of a build like that. I love the way the vehicles look when fully split up, and it is such a fun build to put together and to play with when all is said and done. But then you get to stuff like the Pullback Race Car, which does feel like a bit of a miss for me. For $30, it's really expensive and isn't that much better than a standard Technic $20 Pullback Race Car. Then you get to some oddities like the Mech Storm Rider, which does feel a little awkward having a very uninteresting Kai core mech riding a very strange looking build for a jet, and again, you have some more mixed sets of the wave. But then you get to some other phenomenal sets. Roz and Aaron's Superstorm Jet is a lot of fun. The color scheme is amazing, and it is so playable, it's so swooshable, and I really love how everything came together for that build. It's easily one of my favorites for the wave. And even Lloyd's Forest Dragon has a really cool color scheme, with the dark green and energy elements incorporated in transparent green on the back there. It's a really solid build. And then we get to the smaller sets, which are honestly a little bit mixed. Zayns Mech as a small $10 set is pretty nice, especially because you do get a brand new member of the Forbidden Five as an exclusive minifigure, but the mech itself is a little strange, especially in the way the front cockpit is built, but it is still cool to get 2 exclusive minifigures in the set. And then you have this 4+ set, and honestly, I'm not really even sure what to make of this one. It's $40, it doesn't seem to really even tie into the main storyline. It's kind of like its own separate standalone thing. And then finally you have the gimmick sets, and I'm going to talk about these a lot more in a separate video, but I have mixed feelings about them. For one, it is really fun to get gimmick sets that are focused on head-to-head combat. We haven't really seen that for a long time, I mean since the Spinjitsu Slam sets in 2019, but I do feel like those have come at the cost of being able to actually make these customizable. Talking to some folks on the LEGO team, they stated that nowadays when coming up with gimmick sets, they have to be a lot more careful thanks to customer complaints and kids' safety issues. They made sure that you cannot actually build on top of any of these spinners because they didn't want even the minifigures to be holding weapons as you spin them around to prevent kids from getting injured. And because of that, I feel like these have been kind of almost neutered. They could have been way more interesting by having studs on the side here, allowing you to build your own add-ons to these spinners. spinners, because right now they're a lot of fun to play with, but honestly, I feel like they're missing that customization aspect, which makes LEGO, well, LEGO. Altogether, it's a really fascinating wave. I definitely have mixed feelings, as I said. I didn't even mention the Dragonian Storm Village, which is a weird set overall. It's like a minifigure pack more than a regular set with 6 different minifigs, 3 of which are currently exclusive and many more to come, so it is a really interesting build for a main villain-focused build and the only villain-focused set of the wave. It's alright, I definitely wish that we got something a little larger, but since villain-focused sets don't sell that well, I can see why they made it so small and instead just focused on the minifigure characters that you get, particularly Morro and a new version of Jay as Rogue. Altogether, pricing for this wave is strange as well. We have $100, which is really good and feels very fair for this mech right here, $50, which also seems pretty fair for the jet, and $20, which feels fair for this, and then the rest of them feel varying degrees of overpriced depending on your region. Like $50 for the Kai's Storm Rider is really high. You have $30 for the Lloyd's car, which also feels maybe like $5 to $10 more than it should be. $10 for Zayns mech is fine, but we also were spoiled by a $10 set having 4 minifigures earlier this year, so it was kind of LEGO doing that one to themselves. $20 for this is fine, $40 for the 4+ set is outrageous, but hey, you know it's 4+, what else is new? And then the gimmick sets are priced pretty fine. I didn't expect these to be any less than $10 per spinner anyways. So altogether, a lot of mixed feelings about the wave. The way the minifigures are distributed are interesting, and I'll have a lot more thoughts on those when I dive into my video focusing on the minifigures. It is interesting how many of the characters do not come with the armor elements, like only sometimes they include the shoulder armor that they should have, but for the most part, if they're riding a single vehicle, they just chose not to have the shoulder armor, which does make some of the minifigures feel a little bit incomplete, and it is strange that given that Zayns is the focus character, we technically only get him in his full regular suit in one set, because, well, one of them's brick built, one of them doesn't have a hood, and then one of them is shirtless without a hood as well. So it is cool to get so many different versions of Zayns, but also kind of reminds me of Ninjago Seabound, where while Nia was the main focus, we did only get the main version of Nia in one set. And hopefully Zayns will appear in more sets in this outfit to make it a little bit easier to get a character who's definitely going to be very prominent in this season. Altogether, everything being said, I think it is a fun wave of Ninjago. It's just definitely not quite as strong or cohesive as a whole as other waves have been. I feel like I've been very spoiled by the sets that came out this year, and particularly the summer of this year, which admittedly did include some of the larger sets, so that definitely makes sense why I was so excited about those, and I felt like those were some of the best sets we got for Ninjago ever, versus this just feeling like a little more of the same. Besides this is amazing, and I hope they continue doing more stuff like the combo mech here, because that is such a phenomenal concept that works so well. That's all for this mega review. Thank you so much for tuning in, and do let me know your own individual thoughts and comments down in the comments below. What do you think of the wave as a whole? Do you like it? Do you dislike it? What are your favorite sets? What are your least favorite sets? And which ones, if any, will you be picking up on day one? That's all for now. Thanks so much for watching, and be sure to like and subscribe for even more LEGO news, reviews, discussion, and analyses coming your way very soon. Bye for now.